Good morning everyone. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. First of all, I want to thank the previous speaker, Mr. Antonio Zaballos. So it was actually indeed an insightful sharing. And thank you for
Miss
that.
Mel, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can we also include on stage from True Logic, Mr. Italmar Hero? Let's give him a round of applause as well. Italmar, we apologize for the slip up over there. Thank you.
All right. So as I was saying, so thank you so much, Mr. Antonio Asaballos. It's really good to know like how ADB, right, is really supporting the digital transformation as well as the different programs around artificial intelligence. So I have here with me, I would say, a heavy loaded panel. Okay. In fact, ako po yung ninervous nung nalaman ko that they are my panelists for this morning. So, but I guess before I go there, let me just like share with you quickly, like what are my thoughts regarding the sharing of Mr. Saballos. As we actually put forward, right, an agenda for AI. So we know that AI, regardless of which industry you are in, it's going to be part of our lives. So in other words, there's no really backing out, but it's really for us to embrace. And there are practically a lot of commercial opportunities around it, right? But the manner that we wanted to capitalize these commercial opportunities, we wanted to make sure as well, since there are opportunities, there will also be risk as well as threats that we need to understand, recognize, and also mitigate. So the discussion this morning will actually focus on the policies, frameworks, as well as governance structure around artificial intelligence. And then the second part will be around really the AI adoption. And of course, within the AI adoption, we would be tackling there the different trust principles, all right? So let me start off with my Okay, so let me start off the ball rolling. So with the establishment of the AI governance, development framework, and guidelines, so we've seen this. We've seen this in our neighboring countries, in Southeast Asia, in Greater Southeast Asia. So majority of them, they have already developed their AI governance framework. Let's say, for example, in Hong Kong, right? So they actually, combine it with their personal data privacy regulations as well. We've seen as well, or maybe you have heard, in Thailand and also in Taiwan. So they started crafting the national AI strategy, which will be implemented in the next 2 to 3 years. So my question is, what are the plans to regulate the use of AI to ensure that it is safe and reliable in the perspective of. So the first one is on the perspective of the government. So maybe Yusek Leia, you may want to express your thoughts on this, ma'am.
Thank you very much for that question. I think it's always the government who is looked upon when it comes to regulation, when it comes to policy. But I think we can draw experiences from what these countries have done. And through the AI roadmap that we have crafted, this will give us the guidelines and the guide on where to go and what to achieve in the next few years on AI. But of course, this is a living document because every time there's development, there should be adoption of the roadmap and review of the roadmap depending on what are the developments around the world and even within the country. So the roadmap, I think, will be looking into the ecosystem, the data sets, as mentioned earlier by the secretaries. It all starts in the data sets. So how you do collection, how you do data analytics will give you, I mean, it's garbage in, garbage out.
Very
Whatever
true.
comes in, it goes out as what you have collected. So I think that is where it all starts. So the open data will be a very good start for everybody but just to make sure that the transparency will not lead us actually to irresponsibility. We have to be responsible as well. It's not only the government, but all for those who are using the data sets. So I think government will set the direction when it comes to AI, policy, governance, and even up to data collection.
Well said, Yusek. Yes.
If I may, Mel. Yusek, if I can have a follow-up question. So it was clear from Secretary Solidum of the DOST and Secretary Ivan Oy of the DICT that the government has had plans for a long time. No? And I think the gap that they're mentioning is really an overall mechanism that would have the government and then eventually the private sector ride on. So DOST already is on its 2019 to 2029 roadmap. No? We don't have a lot of time to discuss this now, but for purposes of the audience now, where would they find this roadmap? Would it be on the website? How could they have access to this information?
Thank you. The roadmap actually is in our website together with the other websites of our councils, because we are following one AI roadmap for the different. It's just the application. So the roadmap is in the website.
And this is open access to the
It's
public.
open access.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mel.
All right, so I would just like to jump in. So Yusek Leia mentioned earlier about being responsible, right? So I would also want to hear the thoughts of Deputy Commissioner Dino Aguirre about this.
Yeah. Hi, good morning. So thank you for the question. I think I want to start by first clarifying that AI is not actually unregulated in the country. So
Yes.
there are existing mechanisms and frameworks that are applicable to AI. So I think we shouldn't also rush to regulate AI simply because it's new. We have to have a clear purpose first on what we're actually trying to achieve through that regulation. And in the meantime, leverage existing mechanisms and frameworks to ensure that the AI that is currently being deployed and will be deployed in the country is safe for all Filipinos and ethical, of course. So from the perspective of the National Privacy Commission, as long as the AI system utilizes personal information, then that is subject to the Data Privacy Act of 2012 and therefore subject to the jurisdiction of the National Privacy Commission. So yung, what Yusek Leia mentioned earlier about garbage in, garbage out, that's very important because a lot of data, a lot of AI will use current databases. And we want to make sure that how they utilize whatever they have now is done in a way that is compliant with the Data Privacy Act, that is safe, that it is also fair to all users. So I think we have to look at it from that perspective. We have to, in the same way, right, that you do not utilize AI just because it's new. You have to have a clear purpose for what you're trying to achieve by using that AI system in your company. I think from the regulator's perspective, we also have to have a clear understanding what the Philippines is trying to achieve through the regulation. And while you have examples like the EU AI Act that is out there, they came up with that issuance for their particular needs. And I think the Philippines has to be very clear first and purposive. What are we actually trying to achieve? And I think in order to do that, there has to be clear collaboration across all of the different government agencies that are now looking at AI through their own particular lens. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But again, in the meantime, we have these existing mechanisms that we can utilize, one of them being the Data Privacy Act, to ensure that it is safe for everyone.
I just have a follow-up question, Deputy. So National Privacy Commission basically is the vanguard for data privacy, personal privacy, and you said you know exactly how what it requires. No, there's always there's always a balance between being too restrictive in the compliance for the Data Privacy Act, such restrictions that may impede commerce and progress. No? At the same time, you also have, as a regulator, the responsibility to protect such data and for the privacy of our citizens. No? But where are you right now in terms of your vision to be progressive? Are you okay with the current laws or the laws that are in Congress right now? Because AI is moving at such a speed that I don't even know what your competency and capability as an agency, funding-wise, manpower-wise, in order to just catch up with this kind of development. Perhaps you can elaborate, Deputy.
So thank you, Yusek Noni. I think, so first, I recognize the concern and I acknowledge that as far as funding and all of these things, yes, there has to be a lot of things that need to be done. But I also want, I think, everyone to understand that there is no disconnect between the Data Privacy Act and encouraging innovation. In fact, part of the mandate of the National Privacy Commission is to encourage innovation by allowing the free flow of data. So I think what we want to push for, at least the current mindset of the Commission, is not to come up with very prescriptive laws, precisely because you mentioned it's very difficult for the regulator to catch up. Oftentimes, what you'll end up doing is you'll come up with a regulation that makes sense for now, but it will not be able to keep pace with the development in technology. So what we want to provide is come up with clear standards and guardrails and also provide for mechanisms to ensure that those standards are being implemented. Because coming up with standards is useless if there's no way for you to look at that. So more of a soft law approach, Yusek, because it hopefully will provide enough clarity for the developers and users of AI to understand what is expected of them, but at the same time be flexible enough and adaptive to all of these different changes and iterations that will inevitably happen when it comes to AI.
Okay. Okay, thank you for thank you for your response. Yusek, Depco, meron pa sana akong follow-up question dyan. Pero mamaya na lang po pagdating sa implementation because I know that question will definitely be the same question of the private sectors, tech leaders, digital risk leaders who are actually in this session. All right, so I would like to hear the thoughts of Mr. Itamar. Very specific on the perspective of developer and deployer. And Attorney Edsel, on yours would be on the operator since you are heavily involved on the consulting side. Okay, sir.
Thank you. So I'm here representing the SME, the private sector. And like Donald Lim said earlier, we're on a precipice. We're about to ride a wave. My libertarian approach is don't stop me. Like, if we're looking at countries around us, we look at Singapore and Hong Kong, they don't have regulation as much as they have guidelines, right? And I'm saying, like, AI is a tool. You're not regulating the tool. You want to regulate cybercrime, you want to regulate fraud, regulate that. Let me ride that wave. And we're anticipating 12% GDP growth just because of unlocking AI opportunities. This is why I say we have to be very careful not to curb too much the usage of AI in the private sector.
Okay. Mr. Yeah.
All right, so
Go ahead.
I think one, I think it's, in my view, as a legal practitioner, it seems clear that you do not need a comprehensive law to be able to achieve good for AI use. And in fact, a number of countries around the world have taken a no-hands approach, but left it to existing mandates of, for instance, data protection authorities to use existing mandates in existing law, product liability, data privacy, to come up with guidelines. So places like Singapore have taken an increasingly a soft law approach, right? So AI governance framework issued by Singapore, it's recommendatory, right? On the other hand, there are a number of what we call uh, uh, regional leaders, like no less than the EU AI Act and the European Union, that have taken this school of thought that's quite comprehensive and deep, right? Uh, everything has to be covered. UK, on the other hand, is somewhere in the middle, which is the use case approach, where existing mandates are being used by the data protection regulator to regulate use cases. All right, so I think the point here is, if it is not fitting to rush into a comprehensive law, given Philippine context and Philippine capacity, then maybe we could be better off considering a wait and see until we have that capacity.
Yeah.
All right, so that's
Yes.
one approach. On the other hand, as a practitioner, I still think that even in the absence of comprehensive laws, we do have sufficient standards and frameworks that we could use in order to achieve responsible, safe, and ethical AI use. And I think there are existing laws for that, right? It remains to be seen whether a new comprehensive law will make us better off, because I have not seen so far a really good draft, right? But who knows? Maybe,
Yes,
maybe.
yes.
But there are a number of standards, ISO 42001, 27000
that's very true.
series, right? And then a number of even the norms under the EU AI Act that will affect us, because we may be affecting EU markets, can be used to achieve the same ends. That's it for me.
Yes, actually, even the NIST, if you guys have heard about the NIST risk management framework on AI, because like my company is heavily, like invested in that. It is also one of the good standards, of course, aside from ISO. Mr. Kong, let me hear from you,
Okay.
please.
Yeah. Perhaps my perspective could be a little bit different coming from the international organization.
Yes.
So ADB is functioning as a public institutions, and dealing with AI risk is a really important factor, because we don't want to provide some AI solutions to our member countries that have risk, that which could also jeopardize our reputation. So ADB has a zero tolerance with any AI-related risk. So how we approach in addressing and governing such AI-related risk is that we do a combination of some practical measures, plus we have a responsible AI framework that we help our ADB staffs and also our stakeholders to safely implement and deploy the AI solutions. So we have a digital risk assessment working group, which consists of experts from different sectors and also different themes to come together and assess the potential digital risks that we have to be aware of. So we are trying to be holistic in terms of addressing this issue, because, as you know, AI is a cross-cutting theme, and it could be applied in different sectors. So we not only need the technology knowledge, but also the sectoral knowledge has to be there to make sure that we are aware of how AI is going to be impacting that sectors. So we have that working group, and we recently also launched the a responsible AI framework, which considers the ethical deployment of AI. It consists of key principles that ADB is trying to pursue, and it comes with the AI risk assessment tool. I think we also have to make sure that in order to make sure the framework is actually implemented into working level, we have to support the working level staff with the tools to make it easy to implement. So we have this tool that help staff to measure potential AI risks and also recommends potential mitigation strategy, and so that to make sure the AI is ethically and responsibly implemented throughout the ADB's development projects.
So, Mr. Kong, if I may ask, so I would assume this is a localized tool within EDB?
You mean the assessment
Yeah,
tool?
yeah.
Yes, it's specifically for
But
ADB.
the AI in your case, is it a committee or have you formed a team already? And
Yes, ADB has an AI working group which involves all the management level, senior management levels.
Yeah.
So, like I said, the holistic approach is very important to have all the endorsement from different departments and sectors. So, yeah, we do have working groups and committees.
Okay, so thank you for that. I'll go to the next one. So, well, we have seen, right, in the news about the negative side of AI. So there goes the weaponization of AI, the misinformation campaign. There is also like some violations as well on the privacy side with regard to compromises when we speak about algorithmic recommendations, very specific dealing with the different online platforms or let's say even online services for that matter. So I would like to actually further understand, maybe let's go back to DepCom Dino. Do you see that there could be potentially like policy enhancement or amendment? And sir, isisingit ko na yung tanong ko dito. Excited din kasi ako malaman yung sagot. Kasi kahit po ako, hindi ko alam ang sagot doon. Specifically, on the consent. Ayan. On the consent. Will there be guidelines that will be released by NPC? Maybe I would like to take the example there. Like in our case, we wanted to release Cosmo AI. Like when you upload it in our app, it will actually profile for you what is that image about. But when we ask for, let's say, policy guidelines and consent, how deep will that be? Kasi di ba sir, sa consent, you just specify what are those. But how, like, is there going to be something like a control around it so that we, the developers, as well as deployers, we are at some point as well protected the moment that the data subject provides a consent? Sige, sir.
So I'll start first by answering the first part of your
Yes,
question.
po.
Are we looking at policy amendments? As far as the Data Privacy Act is concerned, I don't think we need to amend the Data Privacy
So no
Act.
policy. Okay.
It is principle-based and it is technology neutral, and it
Okay.
already covers AI. And the recent issuance that we came up with, Advisory 2024-04, precisely emphasized that AI is covered by the Data Privacy Act, and all we did was provide additional guidelines for people to understand how these AI principles map with the privacy principles, and they map really well, and how they can now implement their AI policies, their AI systems in a way that is compliant with all of the expectations and obligations under the Data Privacy Act. So please take a look at that issuance if you haven't. We hope that it serves as a good guidance for people that are looking at training and developing AI and implementing it. And it's just one of several steps, hopefully, that the Commission can issue to provide further clarity on this. Specific to consent, it's hard to give specific advice because I don't understand the context that we're working with. But let's first go back to the idea of what consent is. It's just one of the lawful basis for processing. So you have to understand, is consent really what is necessary for that specific processing that you're undertaking? Because you can rely on other things. And that will be a determination that will be dependent on the types of data that you're actually utilizing. Is it personal or sensitive personal information? Because if it's not sensitive personal information, then you can maybe utilize legitimate interest as your other basis for processing.
Okay.
As far as the level of granularity that you need to provide in terms of the information to your data subjects, it's also hard to come up with a bright line rule because it depends on who your target audience is. The important thing is that you provide them with the level of information that will enable them to make an informed decision. And that language of that notice, information, consent form has to be tailored to who your target audience is. Is it something that the average member of your target audience will be able to understand? So I think that's the general guidance that I can give.
Okay.
You don't have to specify each and every single thing that will happen. As long as a person reading it understands in very broad terms what will happen and what are the risks associated with this to allow them to make an informed decision, then I think that is sufficient.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So for the tech leaders who are here as well as digital risk leaders, so you heard it from Deputy Commissioner Dino. So USEC Leia, so we have seen with the sharing of Secretary Solidum earlier, right, with regard to the different projects that your agency has already embarked. So we would also want to know, like, how did you put in the perspective of the ethical use of AI, ma'am?
Well, the ethical use is somewhat a very controversial aspect these days. Putting in some first removing biases will be part of the ethical issues. So from data gathering, you should know at first that the data there will be very, very, very little bias. That's one of removing the ethical issues. Second, I think we have to also develop the AI governance framework so that the ethical issue could now be included in that framework. And likewise, we need to have also to regulate the AI in digital services. It should be very transparent, but at the same time, explainability requirements should be in place. So meaning you can explain what you did in that specific data set so that it's not only transparency, but even explainability. And I think enhancing cyber security policies should be part of the ethical issues, considering that the use of the different data sets and even deep fakes and information
True.
should be part of the cybersecurity policy of the government. So enhancing our cybersecurity policy would mean that there should be a collaboration between the different government agencies putting up this enhancement of the cybersecurity policy.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. Mr. Kong, I'm just actually curious to know, like, in your organization, how did you, like, harmonize the deployment of your AI projects vis-a-vis data protection and cybersecurity?
So, excuse me, how do I incorporate cybersecurity
Like, yeah,
component
like
in
how
the-
did you incorporate, like, the cybersecurity controls, data protection controls within your AI programs in ADB?
Yeah, I think if you look at the data protections, I think getting the consent is also very important. And you have to make sure that the provider of data, they are willing to use this for the AI training model. That's given. And also, you have to make sure that there's no like a personal identification data within the data set. And that's some sort of procedures. There's some procedures that you have to go through to make sure that it is safe to be trained on AI and make it public. So that sort of a process is within the AI implementation process. So to make sure that we protect the data as well. And also we do have a cybersecurity experts working within our team who make sure that the cybersecurity frameworks are properly implemented in the AI solutions. But again, this is something that we need to work with within the bank and also our local stakeholders, because they might have a different needs. Some they might consider about their data leakage or data sovereignty. You know, sometimes if
True.
you use like ChatGPT, GPT API, there's a risk of your own data leaking out to the foreign service providers, and those kind of awareness needs to be within the government officers and needs to be informed in advance when implementing so that this does not come back to us and create any like issues or data issues and so on. So all this awareness plus these safeguard measures we are taking together to make sure that data is protected and cybersecurity is robust.
Oh, okay. So, guess if I will summarize that, technically, from a cybersecurity perspective, in the context of AI, we try to secure on the topmost three items. First one is the data, and then the second one is the algorithm, And then the third one will be the result of the analysis or the inference or whatever you actually wanted to call it. But of course, underneath that, you may want to consider as well IPR, right? I would assume you would agree to that. And then as well as, of course, governance and the robustness and the security of the core digital infrastructure that actually secures your AI. So as we know, the law may actually, take up some time for it to be published, and you cannot really do a straight equation, and it will never be right. Like like the timeliness, like these laws, regulations, right, will be out vis-a-vis like how fast can AI can actually scale. So from the private sector, so I would like to ask, like, what are some of the quick wins that you are looking at here? So I will first throw this question to Itamar and then to Attorney Edsel. Sir, go ahead.
So the question is about the private sector and about rolling out of regulations.
Yeah. Like based on what you've seen, like what are some of like quick wins that you can share? So, yeah.
For us, like I said earlier, we want less regulation as much as possible.
Okay.
We want guidance. We want to be what we could do is just educate our own, first of all, people, and then clients. I think Yusek mentioned explainability in AI, explaining what was done with AI, just to to be able to come forward with anything that whether it was media or written content or advice. We're more in marketing, but in healthcare, whether a diagnosis was made with the help of AI, I think explainability is part of this overall change management where you want the crowd to start accepting your solutions. Because once the regulation is there, you want the change management to already be out there and happening. So for me, from my perspective of the private sector, it's really kind of training internally to understand how those decisions are made by AI, how the content is generated by AI, so we're able to explain it to our end users. Being able to tag what is AI, what is not AI, just to build a bit more trust when a lot of the product of a lot of companies will be AI driven, and we're seeing it really rapidly evolving.
Thank you, sir. Attorney Eds.
Thank you, Mel. So, for one, there are a lot of AI principles on safety and ethical use, and generally, OECD, you have NIST framework, the playbooks and runbooks, you have ISO, you have UNESCO, but generally, the principles on AI safety, responsible, and ethical use have converged. Some say 7 principles, 9. OECD has 10, 5 and 5, right? But generally, there is consensus of these principles. Now, the question now is, how can private sector initiatives, proponents, translate these principles so that every time they use AI systems, there will be no harm and that the benefits are maximized on AI. And AI is not always harmful, right? I mean, you have a lot of benefits, medical technology, diagnosis, cancer treatment, and so on and so forth. So governance frameworks are the way to go for private sector companies. And they should be proportionate to the needs of the company. It doesn't have to be so grand if you're a startup, right? And 4-24 of the NPC's advisor actually cites a number of elements that could be very useful in coming up with AI governance frameworks. 4 components comprise AI governance frameworks. So the first would be for companies to consider issuing policies and procedures that translate those 7 or 9 or 10 shared AI principles, which are global consensus, and provide for metrics to weigh against and test against in the implementation of these policy procedures. The second would be to, come up with several lines of defense. So a cybersecurity professional, that's, you're going to the controls, the people controls, the audit, continuous training and improvement, and so on. The third would be to really inculcate AI literacy. So that's media information literacy, continuous improvement, training and awareness. And the fourth and last but not least, it was mentioned by Itamar, is change management. So change management ought to be built into any AI governance framework. NPC 4-24 also mentioned AI ethics boards, right? AI ethics committees. Perhaps consider in, appointing a chief AI officer if you have the scale. If you do not have the scale, then you can append it to the existing privacy or CISO
Yeah.
role, and then hopefully that person gets more compensation. Back to you, ma'am.
Yes, yes. Actually, natetempt na ako, sir, to ask my second question. So thank you so much, Attorney Edsel, for the segue. But I am curious, yes, the appointment of the Chief AI Officer. All right. So, sir, I would like to ask you again. Is this appointment, is this person, has to be different from the Chief Digital Officer, from the CISO, or from the DPO? I know there are companies locally and some abroad wherein they ask the DPO to be the Chief AI Officer. But sir, medyo tatalon lang ako on the implementation side. What are your thoughts on this?
Excellent question. So I really want to answer this question. You patok na patok, right? So we start with the idea that AI systems is a socio-techno concept, right?
Okay.
Techno-sociological phenomenon, right? So what was a bias 10 years ago may not be a bias today, and so on and so
True.
forth. So we start with that role where the chief AI officer, if the company does have scale to point one, assuming, then we look at three things that would make things inclusive in a socio and a techno understanding, right? It can't be completely too tech. It also can't be completely too sociological or non-tech, a mixture of both. 3 M's, so multidisciplinary, right? So that person ought to have a handle in several domains, at
Okay.
least some proficiency, talks different languages. Of course, there will be a domain bias towards one or the other,
Yeah,
whether
yeah, yeah.
CISO or privacy or even compliance, right? Number 2, multi-stakeholder. So the chief AI officer must be able to handle multi-stakeholders, several
Okay.
stakeholders at a time, to manage all these viewpoints so that when it comes review time, when the privacy impact assessment or the AI impact assessment comes to his table or her table, he or she can distill various viewpoints. The third would be, the third M, multilateral. Because AI
Multilateral.
systems
Okay.
are almost always cross-border.
Yes.
Right? There's a cloud system involved, or there's a provider deployer elsewhere, and then where the user here, distributor, multilateral. That chief AI officer must have a handle over multilateral relationships, multilateral aspects, cross-border aspects of AI rules and ethical use. Thank you.
Okay, so sir, thank you so much for the 3 M's, but hearing from it, so I think there will be a number of executive candidates if that will be, yeah, the qualifications. All right. So, Yusek Lea, no? So I would like to hear your thoughts with regard to what can be like, because we've mentioned earlier, right, like the industries. Do you think that there will be some industries that need to be prioritized when it comes to compliance on AI? Like, for example, those industries dealing with credit scoring, with social scoring, right? Those industries that would actually deal with, say, recruitment selection that could lead to some biases with regard to gender or even racial. What are your thoughts on this, ma'am?
Yeah, I think, well, there's a lot of industries, so I think we have to prioritize which industries will have to use AI. I think scoring and credit will be one of them. But likewise, also for the industries for dealing with health will be also a priority, considering that we are one of those on health risks. Likewise, industries on natural hazards, dealing with natural
Okay.
hazards. We are very prone to one of the very vulnerable countries. So I think prioritizing will not only provide us the direction, but even target our resources efficiently, where these industries could really use AI and advance their industries to the maximum, using the AI as a very good potential for their industries.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I would jump on AI adoption and use. So, as we know, so many businesses would actually use AI to boost their productivity and also to, of course, enhance user experience, among others. So, I would like to throw this question to my good buddy here, Anton. So, how do you see AI shaping the technology trend?
Well, first, just to give a background, no, until last November, I was the general manager for the National Development Company, and I established the Philippine AI Resource Initiative. That was a little bit afterwards. We created this Global AI Council Philippines because we really saw the gap. No? So the question for us now. The issues that AI has are really the same issues slapped on with the new brand AI. Data analytics, algorithm, digital transformation, technology, they're all there before. And now AI, it suddenly all became sexy, right? But the concern for the consuming public, by far, I am not an AI professional. I'm just trying to understand. So my journey for AI, and I'm likening it to the journey of the general public in the Philippines for AI. I have a finance education organization where we espouse financial literacy, and we see the journey as financial awareness, and then you have financial understanding, and then financial literacy, and then financial proficiency. So I see the same journey in AI. No? AI awareness, where we are all now, where our awareness in AI, as mentioned in the earlier talk, was really ChatGPT, and now DeepSeek, and now 20 hours ago, Alibaba came out with its own. No? So really, by the day, there's a development. No? So financial understanding is not just mere awareness, but basically an understanding of how it works. And knowing what to do with that understanding is literacy for me. No? It's not just comprehension. It's really knowing what to do with that. And then proficiency would be for those who actually make a business out of AI, like True Logic. No? And, everybody will be affected by AI. So there's a lot to digest and talk about, but in my opinion, what people are more concerned right now is authenticity. For example, how do I know that the person, quote unquote person I am communicating with my device or over the phone, how do I know that that is a real person, right? It's a real voice. You know, you're chatting, it's actually real, right? There's screening. You know, you identify what this is, an ambulance, a road, a car. You know, there's a lot of screening, but the current AI cannot already determine, no? So that's the first one, authenticity. Second, is it really that important? I mean, should it matter to me that it's a real banker that's dealing with me, or should it matter to me that I know that it's an AI? Because of the pandemic, we have a more acceptance that we are okay on digital transactions online, and even if we know that it's an AI, we're okay with it. But how far will that be pushed? And what is, Deputy, this is my question. Should that even be regulated? Is there some sort of misrepresentation if the company does not declare that the consumer is talking to an AI counterparty, that it's not declared? Is it supposed to be declared? I mean, so I'm sorry for not really answering. I'm just, I'm not an AI expert. I'm trying to get a handle on how AI will affect us in our lives, more the general population, and how to communicate that. So I hope I didn't muddy the situation, but in which case maybe I'd like to ask a response from our panel.
Yes, Itamar.
So I agree with Anton about the awareness or education part. AI is not new. It's been out there for 50 years. Yet in the last 2 years, the advancements that we've seen and the democratization of being able to use AI, specifically generative AI, is something that would have been science fiction just 2 years ago. Now everybody is using it, ChatGPT and the likes. And I see in commercial use, there are three layers. There's first is the layer of the employee. It's the layer of the self-efficiency. We're using ChatGPT to summarize. We're using Read AI to summarize meetings and so on and so forth. Then there's the operational efficiency. This is where we take a bit more heavy lifting approach and use predictive or prescriptive AI and generative AI to improve processes. In effect, one of our companies, we took one of the functions and managed to cut the cost of servicing by half just by using generative AI, which later on became very appealing to a private equity that bought that company. So that's the middle layer, it's the operational layer. And I think if using AI, using those technologies was a good to have 2 years ago, now it's a must have because it's unlocked efficiencies, just faster, better. And the last layer is like when you actually make the user benefit from AI. And like what Antonio is saying, this kind of explaining the XAI. Is it done by AI? Should we say it? Shouldn't we say it? As long as the client is getting a good service and they're happy with it, there's no problem there. So I think it's really taking an approach, like this three-layer approach of starting by educating the employee layer. I think the zillennials in the organization are the first to just jump on it and use it and adopt it. We're all getting all of a sudden very long, very expressive emails. I'm like, I know who wrote that. But like, and it's also when you have to ask yourself, evaluate, are we using it right? Because you don't take just any output and say, that's right. We spoke about biases. I believe that an LLM or a generative AI should have bias. I mean, is the Chinese AI right, LLM right, to say what they're saying about Taiwan? Is the American one right? They all should have their biases just to be able to service their target market. So how do we navigate this new economy while building those layers all the way to servicing clients with AI? It's still to be unlocked, but it's an exciting, it's a must-have, to my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Who?
So regarding the question on whether you should identify who you're communicating with, so there's no existing, not, so I guess I'll answer it this way. Based on the current principle of transparency and how we understand it, you have to identify that the person that this specific user is communicating with is AI and not a real person. Only so that they can, I guess, set their expectations. But it doesn't necessarily mean that just because it's an AI that I'm talking to, it changes the level of service. It's just so that the data subject knows that they are communicating with someone who's not a real person.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that. That is a very specific example in terms of adhering to the principle of transparency. Thank you, DEPCOM. The next one. So we've mentioned earlier, so some of our panelists mentioned about having a clean data, removing the biases. So I would like to throw the question first with our panelist, Mr. Kong, right? How do you what is your approach in terms of like managing, so not really, but managing the biases? Yes, sir.
I think there were some examples that arise, like mainly focusing on LLM, but if you look at the AI as a whole, there are many other use cases, like a facial recognition and also recommendation system that you usually use on the YouTube, which determines what kind of videos show on your mobile. And that all of that application can be affected by bias, which can have a significant impact on how people think and how people behave. And also the facial recognition there was a research about it has a low accuracy for colored people and also different races. So, so there might be a potential that that might have a negative impact on certain group of people. So it's considered as a high-risk technology in the European countries. So for us, I think for us, we take several approaches in trying to minimize the data biases. I think the first is in the design stage, you should really have to communicate with the stakeholders, and you have to make sure that people that you're trying to serve through that AI service is included in throughout the AI life cycle from the designing stages to make sure that their voices, their behavior patterns are properly represented in the AI algorithm. And if there's a bias that is identified, I think we try to approach this in like a technical approach first. There's a technical approach that's called data augmentation, which helps to minimize the data imbalance. Many of the data bias comes from the imbalance of data sets. So using this data augmentation can also help. And also collecting the data that is less represented in the data sets, which might cause bias, is also a way to go about it. So doing a data collection on that underrepresented group of people can be also a solution for this.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Yusek Lea, we're also interested to know. So you've mentioned earlier as well with regard to managing biases. Like, can you share like some specific approaches that the OST have considered? Did your guys like underwent a training or whatsoever? Yes, ma'am.
So in fact, in the collection itself, we have to make sure that the data you should identify the sources of your data. That's one. The methodologies on how you collected the data should be identified as well. Specifically, if it's going to be like projects or research, you should be very specific on how you collected the data, the methodology, and even how these are analyzed. So the fact that these are data sets and that the requirements for this data should correspond to your outputs, the methodology is very important. So I think those are how we make sure that data removes biases.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Attorney Edsel.
Yeah. So algorithmic bias testing and dataset biases can be a very sticky issue, also very expensive, right? But many standards, including in fact our 4-24 NPC advisory, mentions at least 3 of the biases, right? So that's the statistical, human, and you have the systemic biases
yes.
that ought to be mitigated as part of your governance, right? Which are interesting, borrowed from NIST, right?
Yeah,
RMF,
yeah.
right? So these are traditional definitions of bias mitigation, which can be built into your controls. But I think the point that ought to be made is that even at the development, design, inception phases, early phases of AI development, bias mitigation and algorithmic bias consciousness ought to be built in. So we have, in privacy lingo, we have privacy by default and privacy by design. Here it's, like bias mitigation by design. And there are a number of tools that are being offered, which are not necessarily brand new under, let's say, the EU AI Act. So we have such things as AI impact assessments. We have, and that's been around even as a standard even before the law came out. And we have what we call fundamental rights impact assessment. What is the impact of your AI system upon fundamental rights? So I think being conscious of the need to monitor, train, fine-tune, retrain, test algorithmic biases, or even in the input data, would be crucial throughout the management of the whole AI lifecycle. It's not a one-time static, report, but it's an ongoing thing.
Okay. Attorney Edsel, Meron pa sana akong follow-up question. Okay. So because you've mentioned about assessment, right? So let's take the example of the IT assessment or the IT security assessment. We also have the DPIA, right?
Conformity assessment.
Yes, the data privacy impact assessment. And now we will do another assessment on the AI perspective, right? So maybe like we wanted to seek your guidance, like how does this assessments like differ from one assessment to the other? Kasi syempre like from the private sector perspective, no, the executives in the technology, digital risk, what they will say, wow, okay, so we wanted to do AI, but then again, right, there is another set of assessment that we need to complete, and it practically adds up to my pipeline, whether we like it or not, right? So, I mean, how can we better approach this?
So we can approach it in two broad ways. The question is whether you'd want to follow an industry best practice. This is legislation neutral, all right? Do you want to be the best, right? Or NIST, right? And then, on the other hand, if I were to wear a compliance hat, that I'm managing a platform, a social media platform hitting 160 different countries, right? Sakit sa ulo, right? So, what laws ought I comply with? And what are the types of conformity assessments or impact assessments must I check off on each and every jurisdiction? Right? So you could approach it on either of those ways. In the Philippines, under 4-24 NPC's advisory, it is required that your privacy impact assessment must include such things as bias testing, right? So if you have to include the assessment over your AI systems that process personal data into your privacy impact assessment. It's no different than any other technology.
Okay,
right?
all right.
But that's the legal, that's minimum. If you want industry best practices, right? Then a whole new other options come into play. Under the EU AI Act, if it were a best standard, there are at least 3 impact assessments that you have to look at. And it all depends whether you are a high-risk AI system operator, a deployer, whether you're medium or low risk.
You still have the standalone high risk, right? Not to mention about
For
yeah,
high-risk systems, you have the stricter conformity assessments, which are all technical. And then for high-risk systems that impact upon fundamental rights or significantly impact upon human rights, then you are required to conduct what we call a FRIA, or Fundamental Rights Impact Assessment. If your system qualifies as a system that requires a data protection impact assessment, which is not a privacy impact, it's a data protection impact assessment on GDPR section 30 or section 29, then you run that as well if it fulfills the criteria.
Okay, so I would like to resign already as a country DPO. All right, no, just kidding. But actually, thank you so much for that. Depcom Dino, do you have thoughts around it? Siguro the next one, wherein I think some of our members, let's say if I would like to speak on behalf of PCIOA, they would be asking us as well. So how do we do then, right? This fundamental rights assessment, what are some of the guidelines, how we do the bias, how we do the bias impact assessment, parang maybe to us for tech guys, it could be like a bit complex. Yes, Depcom.
Well, not to oversimplify everything, but
Sige po.
you don't need to do them one after the other because the questions are actually pretty much the same. You're looking at what are the things that I need to comply with and how does my current system and how I intend to implement it map out to what is expected. Whether the expectation is industry best practices, current regulation, or current laws. So, and identifying those gaps and addressing those gaps. That is pretty much the point of all of those different impact assessment. Whether you call it a data protection impact assessment, a fundamental rights impact assessment, or an AI impact assessment, all of them are looking at what should be versus what I have and versus what can I now implement to address the gaps that I've identified. So all of them are leveraging off of that idea. So you can bake into your privacy impact assessment considerations relating to fundamental rights because
Okay.
you are supposed to look at that anyway
Okay.
as part of the idea that privacy is a fundamental human right, you are supposed to look at the impact to your data subject when you are conducting a privacy impact assessment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And as you're now applying that idea to an AI system, then that is now an AI impact assessment.
Oo nga
So
eh.
it's not that complicated.
It's-
The point
okay.
is looking at ethical considerations and privacy considerations and how they now affect the data subject. We want to do away with this idea that it's just a compliance matter. It's not. Precisely because we're using privacy, a fundamental human right, and ethics,
Okay.
we're not just looking at a checklist approach. We're looking at what is the impact to people. Because if we have to consider the idea that if people don't trust the AI system that you're rolling out, they're not going to use it, right? So
Okay.
we have to go through that process precisely because we want to roll out a system that people will trust, that people will use, and they will also be able to trust the company that's rolling out those systems. So I think we just have to go beyond a mere checklist approach
Yeah.
and understand that we're trying to use these different impact assessments as tools,
Yeah.
as ways to demonstrate the accountability of the organization, that they are utilizing your information in a way that you can trust them to do so. And therefore, you can trust the products that they're rolling out, the solutions that they're rolling out. It's not just simply ticking the box, but doing it in a way that is fair, safe, and responsible, which is the whole point of what we're
Yes,
discussing.
yes. Very true. So, tama ba, DepCom, Dino, yung pagkakaintindi ko? So, in simplistic terms, what is chewable, no, is we will definitely extend, the effort of performing the risk assessment, right? And this one touches on these things. Okay, but Attorney Edsel, but who is the best person, no, or the best group within the organization to do this kind of assessments? Kasi like we've done already, like the impact assessment from a data privacy side, IT assessment, cybersecurity assessments, right? But these new elements, right, in the picture, who is the best team to do it?
Well,
Anyone from you, sir?
Just before, I guess, Edsel answers, siguro I just want to add, right, we're not requiring the submission of these documents at the start.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
if
yeah.
something
Okay, okay.
happens, we'll take a look at whether you actually conducted these things, just to be able to be sure that you actually took the steps needed to make sure that the product that you're rolling out is safe and secure and fair to the data subjects. And we're also not requiring the implementation of new things necessarily. You can take advantage of existing governance mechanisms that are already in place
Yeah,
within
yeah.
the company. Like, you don't roll out a new product without undergoing testing, without going through all of these things. So you can apply the same idea to AI. Before you roll it out, it will go through testing, it will go through a development
True.
phase. So take advantage of those existing governance mechanisms within the organization. We're not requiring the implementation of something new and unique specific to AI.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd like to approach your question in terms of domains.
Okay,
right?
okay, okay.
So there is no rule that says that insofar as the Philippines is concerned, the proponent to conduct impact assessment X or Y ought to be a lawyer, accountant, ISO 27000 certified lead auditor, so on and so forth. There's no rule that
Yeah.
for that. But I think in terms of governance and in terms of best practice, you want to keep in mind certain professional domains that may have an edge, a handle over AI, right? And it still depends on the vertical that you're speaking with. Is it AI manufacturing, AI health, right? AI health, AI shared services, AI law, right? But generally, there are 3 or 4 domains, and it's not a monopoly. And we want to hew close to the idea that AI is a socio-techno concept, right? It's a blend of disciplines. But generally and understandably, data scientists have been leading the charge, right, on AI,
Okay,
right?
okay.
But I think the need there is to expand the vernacular, You know, the skills, upskilling, reskilling, and so on and so forth. Take a few executive courses. So if you do choose a data scientist to lead the AI charge, then maybe infuse privacy, right? Data protection, privacy. Maybe cybersecurity, right? Because cybersecurity and data scientists actually have clear demarcations, or more or less some blurred lines here and there. Maybe law, maybe auditing, right? Maybe social work, right? That something that would allow the person a mixed bag of soft and hard skills that would equip one to go into the core of AI assessments that can be technical. They can be technical. And it's not just one person. You have a team, right? Assuming that we do have a large scale of things. So that's my oblique answer to your question.
Okay, okay. Really interesting. So I guess like having heard all of those, I think the manner that, like we conceptualize, right, deploy and also monitor AI systems, we also need to consider that, that the human aspect, right, that the human impact is part of the heart of developing AI. So that said, I would just like to ask for some key takeaways, so key messages coming from our esteemed panelists. So Mr. Kong?
So I think after all, AI is to serve humans, right? So I think the human needs to be in the center of AI development and deployment. So in that sense, I think having a very active communication, holistically, collaboratively along all the stakeholders is very important. That I think that that itself, to a certain degree, solve like bias, also some risk mitigation issues as well. So having a active communication with all the stakeholders is one important aspect. And capacity building also is very important. People need to be aware of AI risk, and also in order for AI to integrate smoothly into their business processes, people has to know about the technologies, right? So I think capacity, in a sense, that to mitigate risk and also sustainability of AI system, I think that's also a very important aspect as well.
Thank you. Yusek Leia.
I think we should have a balancing act in everything. It's not AI replacing people, but rather
Beautiful.
AI working for the people. Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. Well said, ma'am.
For me, whether this current wave of AI is a hype or no, we'll discover in a couple of years. Amara's law actually says that we overestimate the impact of a new technology in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. But being that said, I do think that now is the time to invest for private companies in adaptation of AI and integration into operations, because that might be your 2-3 years down the line a strategic advantage over others, especially for the Philippines. With the BPO industry being threatened, there are other things that we can leverage on, and now is the time.
Interesting. Depcom.
Yeah. So I guess more than things that should be complied with. So it's not just about issuing new regulation, issuing new laws. I think people should look at those that are training, developing, and deploying AI as having a greater responsibility. I think they have an obligation to make more thoughtful decisions and assume greater responsibility for the outcome of the products and technologies that they are rolling out. They cannot rely, or they cannot pass the burden to their data subjects, most of whom will not be capable of really understanding everything that they may need to understand. So I think that goes for AI and for other things relating to privacy. We can't pass the burden to our data subjects and have their consent legitimize whatever we are doing. Those that are developing, training, and deploying AI have to have that greater responsibility to make sure that the products that they're rolling out, the solutions they're rolling out, are safe and secure for people in accordance with privacy principles and ethical considerations for AI. And I think we have to look at those principles and ethical, whether privacy principles and ethical principles, as not just compliance points, but as something that will allow us to bridge all of these new technologies while keeping humans and our humanity and our privacy rights intact.
So it should be a shared responsibility at the end of the day. Attorney Edsel.
So safe, ethical, and responsible AI use, 3 M's, right? So safe, responsible, ethical AI use for me is multidisciplinary, it is multi-stakeholder, and multilateral.
Natandaan ko yan, attorney. Yes. Antay.
I just like AI to be, well, I think we're done with the awareness part, most of the country. And the understanding part, I wanted to translate into adoption in operational applications, especially for the MSMEs, which comprise more than 90% of the businesses in the Philippines. Our innovation ecosystem, which is led by our startups and VCs, we want to be able to go in that direction. Thank you.
All right, so there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, from the esteemed panelists of the AI Frontier. Thank you so much and good afternoon, everyone.
And thank you so much as well to our very able moderator, Ms. Mel Negrino. Thank you so much to all our stakeholders, panelists,